And then we've been really kind of getting our hearts ready for Easter here over the last bunch of weeks in this series that we've been in, right? We've been in a series called Follow Me. And what we're doing is taking a look at Jesus and what he has done and how he lived. And one of the things I just continue to come and look at and see more and more is what was done in Jesus. Like when God sent Jesus, it was just a permanent statement of his love for us. Like if you go back and look at the life of Christ, the death of Christ, over and over and over, what you walk away with because of what Jesus did, because of how he lived, because of how he died, all of that is a permanent statement of God's love, right? And so we want to take some time and kind of look at that, marvel at that a little bit, and then we want to hear Jesus' invitation to come follow him. That's what he would say, come follow me. And while we can never be exactly like Jesus, we said this in this series, we've said, man, if I'm going to follow him, I'm going to become like him. What does it mean to become like him? Well, I know that I can't be the perfect Son of God. That's not our place. But we do become like Jesus. And what we've been looking at over the last handful of weeks is trying to figure out what that means a little bit, right? And we probably could take months or years to try to unpack what that means. We said we're at least going to take a little slice of it and look at what did Jesus look like at the end of his days, right? As he entered into what we call the Passion account, the last handful of kind of days of his life as he faced the cross. What does it mean to follow Christ and to become like Christ in that way, right? And how does that kind of apply to us? And so we've been looking at that. If maybe you just jumped in, I know a bunch of folks who are here, you're here for the first time. If you want to go back and like catch those conversations, you can. You can watch them on YouTube, and we'll kind of walk you back through the conversation if you want to catch up that way. Today, what I want to do is as we continue to kind of advance in the series, is we want to look at kind of uniquely what Jesus did for us on the cross. In the purpose of it, we know that when Jesus laid down his life, he was doing something that only he could do in laying himself down for you and I. We're going to talk about that and dive into it. And we're going to see what does that mean for you and I as we interact with other people. How do we become like Christ in that way? And so we're going to dive into it, and I think we'll walk away with a greater level of clarity around what Christ-likeness looks like, and probably understand a little more what freedom is offered to us because of how Jesus lived. We've been looking at this every week. We've been looking at a passage from Isaiah 53. This is a prophet that hundreds of years before Jesus was born would speak about things that ultimately Jesus would fulfill, right? And we don't know totally what he understood as he wrote this, but certainly Christ would fulfill his words. Here's what he says in Isaiah 53, 4 and 5. It says, surely he took up our pain and bore our suffering, but he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. And so we see this right away that Jesus would take on our sin and he would suffer for us. That there's an exchange that took place that we're going to unpack. And that Jesus, when he died, it wasn't just an accident. It wasn't just a murder that took place or an execution. It wasn't just a criminal moment where the Roman Empire would execute or crucify Jesus as a criminal. It was an intentional act by God, by Jesus, to pay for our sin. And that's how the Apostle Paul, leader in the early church, would look back at Jesus' death. Here's what he would say in Ephesians chapter 1, verse 7. He would say, in him, in Jesus, we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins, in accordance with the riches of God's grace. So Isaiah looking forward to Jesus' suffering, right? In the future, Paul looking back at it. They've got the same vantage point, same conclusions are being drawn. And here's kind of how it works out, right? Jesus would look at you and I in humanity, and the reality is we in a fallen, broken world, we were going to sin, right? It was going to happen no matter what we did. And we're at fault for that. We're responsible for that. The problem is the Bible says that when we sin, it costs something, There's a price tag to sin. The Bible says that the wages of sin are death. Somebody's got to pay when sin happens. And so here's where Jesus comes in, is he says, even though I lived a perfect life, I'm going to choose to take on the sin of humanity. And what I'm going to do, and this is the important word here for the sake of this conversation, is I'm going to pay for it. I'm going to pay for it. He made a decision to pay a debt that he didn't owe, right? For us, for you and I, we could never pay for that ourselves. Only Jesus could do that. Now, this is where it gets interesting, is we look at this equation and say, well, what do we do then? How could we ever become like Jesus? I'm never going to pay for somebody else's sin, right? I couldn't. I can't even pay for my own sin, right? I needed somebody to die for me. So how do I become like Jesus if Jesus is the one who paid for the sin of the world? Well, here's kind of how it plays out. The heart and the mindset of Jesus to do this, even though he's the only one who could uniquely pay for the sin of the world, his heart was to bring mercy and forgiveness and to help people reconnect with his Father, with God. And the way that the part that he would play in that would be in paying for the sin of the world. What we're going to see is we have the same heart and mindset, even though we have a different part to play. You and I aren't going to ever be the savior of the world. We're not going to lay down our lives for the sin of others. But there is a real way that we are impacted by the sin of other people, and how we deal with that matters in a very significant way. And there's a way that we can be like Jesus in it. Here's how we said it in your notes. I said, we don't pay for anyone else's sin, but we do bear with each other's sinfulness. We do bear with each other's sinfulness. Let's play it out. Right? If you are in any kind of human relationship, a friendship, if you were born in a family, if you have parents, if you are in a romantic relationship, you are going to get affected by the sin of other people. Other people's actions are going to show up, and they're going to impact your life, right? And by the way, of course, your sinful actions are impacting other people's lives as well, and there's just no other way around it here in the human experience. Even though we get idealistic with other people, we expect, even though we know this about ourselves, we tend to expect other people to be perfect, even though we know that we ourselves can't be perfect, right? When this happens, how we respond to this, what we do in this red arrow, starts to really matter. And there's a way that you and I can follow Christ in this, right? We bear with each other's sinfulness. Ryan, what does that mean? Let's look at it a little bit here in the book of Colossians. The Apostle Paul breaks it down a little bit. He says this. He says, therefore, as God's chosen people, right? You're the people that God has invited into the family, holy and dearly loved. He says, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other. There's that word. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. And then he says, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, right? He says, which binds them all together in unity. So here's the word. I don't pay for sin. I need my sins paid for. What I do is I have to learn how to bear with the sins of others, right? And frankly, I gotta learn how to bear with my own sins. I gotta learn how to deal with me, because I fail me, and I break my own promises, and I hurt other people, and right? Sometimes I'm on this side of the equation, and sometimes I'm on this side of the equation, and we have to figure out, how do we bear with one another? Right? This is a reality and a skill, frankly, that the people of God develop over time. Is if you are in any of those kinds of relationships that I just mentioned, you're going to bump into this, and you have to figure out, oh, wait a minute, I'm a sinful person that's committed in some way to another sinful person, whether that's a work relationship or a friendship or a romantic relationship or a family relationship. How do I do this, and what does this look like? And the reality is, right, sometimes I'm able to take kind of the sins that people commit against me. I'm able to overlook those. They're not that big of a deal. That person didn't really mean that. I get it. They were tired. They were hungry. They were hangry, right? They had a thing. They needed lunch. You guys have anybody like that in your life when you're like, you were nice until you just didn't eat for too long, right? And then you get kind of mean. Anybody know, right? If you throw the elbow in this room, I know who you're talking about, right? It's a real thing. The reality is we all get that, right? Sometimes we'll just bear with somebody and they're upset. I understand it. I'm absorbing it. We're good. Sometimes the sin is more intense than that. Sometimes it's deeply impacting. Sometimes the sin are words that wound and drive themselves into my heart. And they're things that if I don't deal with them, I might think about those for months or years or decades. In fact, if we took the time, I bet you today even, that there are people's words or actions that are anchored into our hearts and minds, even from elementary school. Something that an uncle said, or a teacher said, or a coach said, or somebody important that was supposed to be in my life wasn't in my life. So actions that happened when you were 5, 6, 7, 8 years old that are today as an adult, or a young adult, or maybe you're a senior adult, and they're still impacting you and affecting you in massive ways. How do I forgive in that scenario? This is where becoming like Christ starts to matter in serious ways. And while it sounds easy to bear with other people, it's not as easy maybe as it seems. All right, people break my trust and they frustrate me, and then I have to decide, how am I going to view the person that has hurt me, right? And Paul's going to say, be like Jesus, and what I want you to do is lead with mercy and forgiveness. And in fact, here's a conclusion that we want to draw. Part of being a follower of Christ is embracing a life of mercy and forgiveness. And mercy, right, is the hope that somebody doesn't get all of the horrible things maybe that they deserve. That it's not as bad as it plays out, that it could play out. That I want what is good for someone. That when I would pray for someone, I would want to see them succeed, not fail. And I want to see forgiveness happen at the heart level. And it's important that you understand that as we're talking about this, when we're using the word forgiveness, we're talking about a decision. This is important. I didn't put it in your notes. It's important. It's a decision that is internal. It is a decision that is internal. I'm making a forgiveness decision on the inside, somewhere in the heart and mind space. We're not talking about, in this moment, about reconciliation, which is external. That's two people deciding to rekindle or refire, right, or renew a relationship in some way. They're two different pieces. Forgiveness is on the inside. Reconciliation is on the outside, and it's how things may go sometimes when forgiveness happens. Forgiveness is the heart posture of the follower of Jesus. The person who follows Jesus and forgives sounds like this: God, you are the judge, I'm not the judge. You saw what they did, and you can make it right. I'm not going to try to make it right. I'm going to posture my heart in such a way that I want to not have them on my hook. I'm going to trust you to take care of any injustice that may have played out. Far easier to say than it is to do, right? Because when you're hurt or you're wronged or somebody wronged or hurt somebody you love, all of those things become very, very difficult. but this is at the heart of what it means to be Christ-like. Now, what that doesn't mean is it doesn't mean that there isn't tough love, boundaries, or consequences. This is a big deal. When we talk about leading with mercy and forgiveness, that does not mean that what we're saying if you follow Jesus is that you're just nice all the time, okay? That's not what it means. Does not mean you're a doormat. Does not mean you just are somebody that everybody takes advantage of, and you're always the one that just, it's no big deal. Sometimes it's a big deal, right? And so here's the thing. All throughout the Bible, I could give you example after example of times when tough love or boundaries or consequences were put in. I'll give you just a few. We're not going to take the time to look at all the passages. One time, there basically a missionary that was on the team with Paul, he basically fired him because he failed the team. He deserted the team, and he said, I don't want him back on my team again. That's not very Christian of him. It's in the Bible, guys. It's real. There's consequences. There's real things that happen. There's real times when there's a position we got to qualify for. There's times to set a boundary, right? And if you're here in mercy and forgiveness and you're like, I got a restraining order against somebody. Are you saying, nope, those things are real and I'm grateful. We're grateful that they exist, and you should make sure that stays in place so that you're safe. Those consequences, those boundaries are real. And listen, if you have somebody in your life who's looking at you and saying, hey, you're a Christian, and I know I did a bad thing to you, but you need to forgive me and give me all of the reconciliation that I had, and we should interact the exact same way as we did before I hurt you. That, you don't, first of all, you don't have to do that. Second of all, that is what we call manipulation, okay? You don't have to walk in manipulation. What you can do is say, I'm going to choose internally to forgive from the heart, and then I'm going to, with wisdom and probably with counsel, figure out how do I look and relate to this person? How do I interact with them? And sometimes that looks like a restraining order. Sometimes that looks like setting the relationship up in such a way that trust can be rebuilt, right? So that, hey, let's start back at the beginning a little bit and set this thing up so that we could land in a place one day where we could be reconciled, right? That we could be back in a relationship and kind of everything in between. So, tough love, consequences, boundaries are all part of this conversation. There are all kinds of abuses that have taken place because that side of the conversation has not been acknowledged. But I want us to see this in Jesus, okay? This is not just a psychology thing. This is a Jesus thing. Look at what he says in John 1:14. John says this about Christ. He says, talking about him, he says, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. Jesus showed up on the planet. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father. Here's your phrase, who came from the Father full of grace and truth. Full of grace and truth. Grace is undeserved favor, the undeserved favor of God. I don't deserve this amazing thing that you're doing for me. This is grace. And then truth is often kind of the rest of the situation, the reality of it. Jesus is full of both of those things, right? He's full of grace and truth. And sometimes we see Jesus leading, even though he's full of both grace and truth, he's leading on the grace side, and sometimes he's leading on the truth side. So say, Ryan, what do you mean? What does that look like? Jesus, I want you to know this, anytime Jesus would interact with somebody who was broken, who was humbled, who was marginalized and hurt, and was asking for mercy, Jesus always met that person with mercy. He always met them with mercy. When Jesus would interact with people who were self-sufficient, who were like the religious leaders who were opposing him, sometimes he interacted with them more strongly In fact, it's right in the Bible. Go read it yourself. He, at times, called the group of religious leaders a brood of vipers. You're like, that's not very nice. Jesus said that. He flipped a table once. He made a whip and started to beat, right? He did some crazy things. Okay, he did some crazy things. Now, why did he do that? Here's why. I want you to see. It's the same motivation. I want you to understand this. Jesus is not some cruel guy with a bullhorn blowing people up. Okay, that's not what he's doing. The same motivation that would drive Jesus to the point of laying his life down on the cross, the same motivation that would cause him to show up humble and gentle to a leper or to a prostitute who had been shamed by her culture. It's the same actual merciful heart that would show up and actually be strong with the person who is self-sufficient and does not have ears to hear him. Because here's the reality. Sometimes the loving thing to do, this is rare, okay? Hear me, this is rare. Sometimes the loving thing to do is to give somebody who can't hear because they're so full of their own perspective, wake-up call. A wake-up call. If it's true that those religious leaders were rejecting their salvation by rejecting Jesus, the best thing he can do is turn up the volume a little bit to say, guys, I came for you and you're missing it. I love you and for you. I need you to wake up and hear me. See, that's an act of love. He's not doing that he would say as he faced the end, he would say, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I long to gather you together like a hen gathers her. His heart was, I wanted you guys to come under my leadership for your own benefit, but because you rejected me. I would love to stand here and tell you guys that there's some easy equation that I can say that says, guys, sometimes you need to lead with grace and sometimes you need to lead with truth, and here's all the scenarios where that totally plays out, and here's the other side of it. I can't totally do that math for you. Here's what I can do. I can say, guys, same thing I would say to myself. I got to get to know Jesus. And as I get to know Jesus and the motivations of my heart, here's the key, are for the person's best interest. When I'm calling and fighting for their heart, I'm in the right place. And sometimes that's very gentle. And sometimes it's bold. Sometimes it's bold. Hear that? Sometimes it's bold. Ryan, I thought being a Christian's nice. Sometimes there's not that much room for nice in grace and truth. There's kindness. There's love. There's passion. Christianity is not just being a nice person. It's being a person filled with grace and truth to the point where we would lay down our lives for each other. Right? Sometimes bearing with each other looks like that. It's the family that has an intervention with the person who's addicted and tells them the truth because they want to rescue them from themselves. It's not very nice. It's very important. It's very important. Because here's the takeaway for us. Grace without truth turns into people pleasing. I'm a doormat. Sure, I'm in. It's no big deal. Oh yeah. Truth without grace becomes harsh and harmful. It's the guy with a bullhorn leading out of anger or hate or judgment, not out of a heart of mercy and compassion. Right? Jesus embodied grace and truth, and you and I, if we're going to follow him, are to look like people that are embodying grace and truth. I can imagine, I don't know, I would love to look at what Jesus' face looked like when he talked to the Pharisees, the people who were rejecting him. I imagine there were almost always nearly tears in his eyes as he said those words, as he fought for their hearts and called them back. See, this is the thing. that drives the follower of Jesus is we're going to look and say, I know I am going to be hurt in this life. Right? It's part of what I want to acknowledge if I'm going to follow Jesus and believe his words. He's going to say, in this world, you're going to have trouble. You're going to run into sin and the sin of people over and over again. When I do that, how I see the person that hurt me matters a ton. Are they just toxic and now they're dead to me and I hope they get what's theirs? Whoa, right? Jesus would say, wait a minute. What does it look like to lead with grace and truth in that person's life? And what I need to understand as a fallen, broken person is if I don't release the bitterness of this offense that has hit me, it's going to enslave me. It's going to steal my joy. If I don't forgive the people in my life that have hurt me, unfortunately, there's another hurt that multiplies, because now not only am I hurt by the offense, now I'm hurt by my own handling of it, by harboring it and holding on to it. When I'm hurt in many ways, it's a double hurt. I'm hurt by the incident, and then I have to go through the hurt and difficult work of forgiveness in order to get on the other side of it. Now, let me say one more thing, and then I'll walk you guys through some practical steps on how we walk away with this. Sometimes I'm on this side of the equation, right? Sometimes I'm on this side. One of the best ways to make this easier for the people in your life, right? Jesus didn't have to do this part. He's perfect. You and I have to, because we are going to fail. We're going to say things that we shouldn't have said. We're going to do things we shouldn't have done. We're going to break promises. All kinds of things are going to happen here. When this happens, the way to make that easier on the people around us is simply this. It's to own it. It's just to own it. Own it. Listen, if you've been in a relationship, a friendship, a marriage, if you've lived in a home with somebody, been a roommate or a child, if you've lived there for a year or 5 years or 10 years and you've never said the word sorry, there's really only a couple conclusions. One is you have lived perfectly. For the last 5 to 10 years, I've never done that, so good luck to you. Give me some tips on how you've done that. Or you're hurting somebody and not owning it. And what you're doing is you're making it hard for them to walk in forgiveness with you. Say, Ryan, what do I do if I'm here, right? Walk me through it. Let me give you five steps that just try to break it down. I wish it were science. It's more art, but at least gives you a little structure to walk in. Here's the first one. Here's some next steps. First one's this. What I want to do is I want to examine my heart. I want to examine my heart. Before God, I want to go before the Lord and say, Lord, is there anybody who has hurt me who I have not forgiven? That simple prayer, Lord, is there anybody who has hurt me that I've not forgiven? And you wait and see who comes to mind. There will be people that come to mind. There'll probably be surprising people that come to mind. That will surface. I almost guarantee it. Examine your heart and begin to ask that question, Lord, what do I need to forgive? Right? And you might have the other side of it. You might say first as well, do I need to say I'm sorry to anyone? Do I need to walk in forgiveness myself? Right? The more, here's the reality. The more I am in tune up here, the more I realize that I have failed God and that God has paid for me, the more I'm going to be able to look at somebody else who has failed and forgive them. I know what it's like to sit in this seat because I've experienced it with Jesus. I want to examine my heart and ask, do I need to say I'm sorry? Do I need to forgive myself in Christ? Do I need to pop up to this level? Do I have people in my life that I need to forgive? What are their names? What were the offenses? Lord, bring it up. Here's the next one. I want to pray for those who have wronged me. I want to pray for those who wronged me. There's something that happens when we bring God into this situation. When you bring God into the middle of the friendship breakdown, or the marital breakdown, or the strain with kid, whatever it is, all of a sudden it gets different, right? His perspective starts to show up in my experience. Look, go read some Psalms, right? If you're taking notes, right? Go look at David and here's how he sounded often. David would start and be like, God, everybody's against me, right? He would start off with anger sometimes. I'm frustrated, I'm mad, blow him up, God. That's kind of where David would start, right? He would start kind of there. And let me just say this. It's okay to start there. It's okay to recognize that, because here's the thing. The wrong that you have experienced is probably accurate. Often it's the case that you were actually deeply wronged. And it was not fair. And that's part of why you're so fired up. God, you saw it, you know, right? And you can go to God with all of that emotion, right in the reality of where you are. And he wants you to. It's okay to. The Bible is far more honest usually than we're willing to be. I want to start there, and here's where David would end up. He would be honest with God, and then he would find himself, as he got it out, he would say, God, you saw it, and you forgave me, and you loved me, and you gave me mercy, and I see that they need mercy too. Whatever you want, God, I want what you want. And he would find himself on the other side of the equation. Pray for the people who have wounded you and harmed you. I'm not saying in this moment that you have to go be best friends with them. Just pray for them. Just go to the Lord about them. And if you can't, or if they come up and it becomes a problem, there's something there to pay attention to. All right, pray for those who've wronged you. Here's the next one. Seek reconciliation where possible. Let me say this, because I know many of us are thinking it. Reconciliation is not always possible. Okay? It's not always possible. Sometimes the person over here who has caused the harm is not alive anymore. Sometimes there literally is a legal restraint, or it's inappropriate for you to rebuild a relationship. There's an ex involved and you're remarried, or it would cause things to fire up that shouldn't be fired up. All that's real. And what Paul would say is, as far as it depends on you, be at peace with all people. Right, Romans 12. As far as it depends on you, be at peace with all people. What can I do to take ownership for being at peace with the people in my life? Can I write a letter apologizing, or can I begin to initiate relationship by moving towards them? And you should seek counsel, talk to a pastor or a counselor, especially if it's complicated. But seek reconciliation where it could play out. And again, reconciliation is the external part. Forgiveness is for everybody. Reconciliation happens sometimes. Here's the next one. Set healthy boundaries. Set healthy boundaries. When there's been brokenness, or trust has been broken and relationship has been broken, to look and say, with a heart of mercy, I want to set this relationship in such a way that either trust can be rebuilt, or people can operate in safety and in health. Sometimes that's what has to happen in order for relationships to be restored, or for people to function well. If you've never read the book Boundaries, it's a great one if you are needing some more input on this. Lots of good stuff there. It's a big one. Set healthy boundaries. And then here's the final one. Walk in daily forgiveness. Right? Walk in daily forgiveness. The reality is, you and I often can't tell when I'm hurt. It doesn't come out as hurt. It feels like I'm mad, right? And like, oh, I'm mad because I'm hurt. Takes a minute to see it. So when I begin to see when somebody has that side comment, and I recognize that was hurtful, and I make a decision to forgive, and then I figure out, is it something that needs to be brought up or not, to keep short records of wrong and to deal with those things as they come up, to walk in daily forgiveness. When I'm wronged, when I'm overlooked, when somebody has the side comment, I want to walk through this. Right? So here's your 5. Right? Examine the heart, pray for those who've wronged, seek reconciliation when possible, set the boundaries, and walk in forgiveness. And guys, like I said, sometimes this is deep. It happened early. The wound was significant. If that's the case, at least this has been my experience. Okay? It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take us some significant work to forgive. And I know even now, as I'm talking this all through, some of you guys are here and you're thinking, Ryan, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to go there. I don't want to go revisit it. I moved past it. But if you moved past it and you never actually dealt with it, the work has to be done. Right? Here's what I would tell you. The work I'm asking you to do, I've done myself. In fact, this year, all of our campus pastors, we spent over an hour just working on forgiveness, internally, personally, at a retreat that we're at. Why? Because this is happening to us all the time. It's happening to me. It's happening to you. We are sinning against each other all the time, and we've got to deal with it. And guys, you listening to this conversation and walking away and not doing anything, just like me, is not dealing with it. It's actually taking the time to do those 5 steps that I just broke down. It's the hardest work that I know of, and, hear me, it's the most fruit-bearing. If you want to release yourself, free yourself from bitterness, this is the path to do it. And if you don't, it will anchor itself into you and squeeze the joy and the vibrancy and the trust that comes in healthy relationships out of relationships, and it will slowly put a stranglehold on you. So this matters, and there is a graciousness in what Jesus has said when he said, hey, come follow me. Love as I have loved. Forgive as I have forgiven. Lay yourself down like I laid myself down. Right? Take up your cross daily and follow me. Guys, we're going to give the band's going to give us a little room here just to begin to do this now. And I would just encourage you to begin to maybe grab your phone and get the notes app out and start writing names down as you ask the Lord to bring them up. Maybe you take notes. Maybe you make an appointment this week to walk these 5 steps through. When is it going to happen? But begin to let the Lord open your heart and your mind and lead you into a place that's free as you follow him. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes with me? The band comes out. Father, we today, we just stand in awe of the fact that you are the only one who is perfectly just and justified in looking at us and saying that we did something wrong. And even though that's true, Lord, you, Jesus, you came to the planet and you allowed yourself to be sinned against. And you allowed that happen even to the point of death. And you did it for us. Out of love and out of mercy. And everything about it was unfair to you. Everything from beginning to end. And yet you chose it. And Lord, would you help us with this today? Help us to be honest with our own hearts about the wounds, about the hurts that exist, about the people that need forgiven. And would you give us courage, Lord, to follow you, loving as we have been loved. Meet us here.